Hi everybody, thanks for joining us today on our live video. So today we're going to do probably something a little bit different to what we've done previously, and we're going to talk about kind of generally businesses and how important it is they understand the wider social responsibilities that they have and kind of how they can do things and what they can do. And I'm pleased to say I've been joined by three people I know it's very important to, and I'll hand it over to them in a minute to explain who they are and what they do. But very much today's conversation is going to be all about, like I said, wider responsibility for business. And if you're watching this on any of the social media channels, feel free, if you've got any comments or questions to put, feel free to add them, and we'll try and field as many as we can. So like I said, please do join in. For those people who are watching it on playback, I know a number of people do. Again, put anything in there, and whether it's respond on the social media, I'm sure the three guys plus myself, we can try and answer anything later on. So without further ado, I will go around and just ask everyone to briefly introduce themselves. I'm kind of going to go around the screen. Kate, if that's okay, if I can start with you.
Sure. So I'm Kate Stansfield, and I run Kate Stansfield Translations. I'm primarily a translator from French and Spanish into English, and also a proofreader and copy editor. So my background is in language services, but both within an agency setting for 3 years, working primarily with corporate clients, and also at the UN for an internship, and sort of working a lot on a pro bono and paid basis for some international NGOs. So a bit of both sides. I decided about 2 years ago that I want to shift my focus to almost entirely working with clients who are basically trying to make a positive change in the world. So that is the main focus is on sustainability. That's where my main passion lies, but also obviously with my experience of working with not-for-profits, it's that as well, and I've done a lot of work in the international development field. So yeah, it's all tied up in what I'm trying to do with my business, very much so.
Thank you, Kate. Laura, you okay?
Yes, thank you. So to introduce myself, I'm Laura from Chroma Marketing. It's a marketing consultancy. So we work with small business owners to build the best marketing for them. One of my core values as a business is sustainability, and anybody who knows me knows that I harper on about it all the time. I run a video series which is kind of the entry point to that for Chroma, called A Chat With, where we talk to businesses and individuals that have a positive impact on the Yorkshire region. So as part of the marketing, I guess, I see marketing as the way to understand people. And by understanding people, you understand what impact you have on those people and what impact those people have on you. And it's all about how that conversation works. So that's essentially the root of why I set up the marketing business, and how, for now, it talks about sustainability is the video series and that kind of understanding people. I'm also doing some behind the scenes on wider sustainability in business. It's one of my core values, hence I guess why I'm here.
Thank you, Laura. And finally, Natalie.
Hiya there. So yes, hi, I'm Natalie, and I'm the CEO for Simon on the Streets, which is a homelessness outreach service which we provide across Leeds, Bradford, and also at Kirklees area as well. So for me, obviously, as an independent charity, we rely quite heavily on businesses who have a corporate social responsibility policy, which of course is amazing for us to try and work with. We also do a lot of other fundraising types as well, but it's really, I think the big thing for us as an organisation is that relationship building and being really transparent about what we do, so that businesses can kind of understand the benefits that it will have for them, for their employees, and for wider society as well. So it's really excited about today to kind of talk about this topic around social responsibility, particularly what businesses can do more of, and how charities like ours as well can support that as well, because I think we've obviously got a place for that as well in terms of being able to support that process.
Thank you very much, Natalie. And I'm going to come back to you actually first on the first question, Natalie, if that's all right. Is obviously what's happened in the last 12 months or so, there's been a big change in a lot of areas of the world. But one of the things I think that might be is that kind of generally people's opinion on society and their responsibilities has hopefully changed a little bit. You think of the campaign, say, a lot of what Marcus Rashford has done and various other things that have really maybe changed people's opinions on things. I mean, you'd see things on social media previously, if it was talking about, say, free school meals, the response that the general public had towards that has changed a lot, I think, in the last 12 months. It was maybe, should we say, a bit more negative previously, and there has been a change. So I just wanted to kind of get your thoughts on how that's changed in the last 12 months and what differences you've seen in people's belief, just as individuals, not so much as businesses, but yeah, the kind of changes that we've seen.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think there's been a massive change. I think for us as an independent charity, of course, the worry for us during COVID, knowing that businesses were sort of shutting down, the workforce wasn't there to maybe do some of that fundraising stuff. We knew the impact it'd have, obviously, on generally the community, people losing their jobs or people being put on furlough. So for us, we were very kind of acutely aware that would have a huge impact on us in terms of what came into the charity. But I think what we saw was, as much as, yes, of course, there was a reduction of income coming into us, we did see a massive, communities really reaching out, really starting to look inside their own communities to look at how they could best support each other, which was phenomenal. I mean, even where I live in Leeds, the community I live in just really, really came together. So I think it really put the spotlight on some of those wider social issues as well, and homelessness was key to that. So, for example, when the Everyone In campaign started by the government and they started getting all homeless people into emergency accommodation, it really, put homelessness back in the spotlight again in terms of, the difference between cities in terms of how they'd coped with that, how cities were coping with that process, and how outreach agencies like ours were working with the homeless. So it absolutely put it back on the radar. And what we saw as an organisation was a real influx of people just wanting to help, businesses who were reaching out and saying, look, we can't help you in the way we would have normally helped you, but can we do something different? Is there anything that we can support with? And communities the same, really, really coming together. So we've absolutely seen a shift in how people view perhaps the homelessness itself as a wider issue, and maybe seeing the impact of that more because cities change massively. You walk through, say, Leeds city centre, for example, and it was like a ghost town. And people were genuinely worried and ringing us up saying, what's happening to these people who are on the streets? What's happening to people who are begging where there's no footfall? How are you guys working with these people? Is there anything we can do to help? So it really did, although, there were challenges around things that we were doing in terms of fundraising, you could see that it certainly was. It hadn't gone away. People weren't, as we maybe expected, caught up with their own issues. It really did make them think about society, how they could help, and really coming back to the community. So it's been, it was quite, it was a really, really lovely time actually to kind of feel that real community spirit across all the 3 different areas that we work in.
Yeah, that's great. That's great to hear, Natalie, actually. So, Kate, kind of how you think things have maybe changed in the last year in relation to this?
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, there's certainly that feel of within communities, everyone rallying around. I've seen lots of, as Natalie said, businesses just suddenly use that horrible word, pivoting, but in a fantastic way, just being really imaginative and innovative in how they can get food out, for example, to people. And there's lots of amazing projects going on in this area in that regard. I was going to say something. I just completely lost my. I blame hunger. That's it. And also, I feel like there's been more scrutiny, sort of in terms of what businesses are doing. Maybe more understanding of the processes that lead to issues like homelessness, because it's perhaps hit home a lot more widely than people. Perhaps people have become more aware of it where they weren't in the past, of how quickly someone can really get into a vulnerable situation, and more awareness of how different approaches have varied between businesses in terms of their responsibility to their employees, etc. That's what I was thinking about earlier. There was a lot of kind of criticism of certain companies and then praise of others, how they've supported their employees and reacted to the situation. So yeah, I think that's really been at the forefront of people's minds as well, especially earlier on, perhaps last year.
Absolutely. And Laura, kind of how you think things have changed a lot in the last year or so?
I completely agree with what Natalie and Kate have said. I think in the last year, there's definitely been a trend of digital movements. I mean, an example of something that's been talked about recently is a kind of very different example, banking, and where companies source their investments. So Oatly, the alternative milk company, have got in a lot of bother this year or this last year because they are invested in by companies that are like fossil fuel related, and it completely goes against their brand values. And I do think that if it wasn't for things like Twitter and digital campaigns, some of these movements just wouldn't have happened, because of the lack of trust in media outlets, which would be the alternative. But I am going to kind of play devil's advocate here, and I do think it's going to be a test of time over the next year to see whether it happens and continues. I think there's a lot of people that are very in the now with these movements, and because their life circumstances might change, or because their focal area changes, then it doesn't continue. And I think what needs to happen for this to be sustainable, whether it's with regards to homelessness or investing or food, child poverty, is that it's a continual thing. There's work that needs to happen continually, and it can't be something that enters your radar for a few months because you're in that situation, and then when you're not in that situation anymore, it leaves your radar. So I think when it comes to these movements, absolutely, I think coronavirus, the pandemic, people's life situation has definitely spurred more involvement by the wider community of these movements. And I think the fact that people are spending time on their phones at home helps that. But I do also think that it's going to be very interesting over the next couple of years to see whether that actually continues and whether people still hold people and businesses and you massive politicians, especially, to account. Yeah.
If I could just add to that, I completely agree. I was thinking about this earlier, and on one hand, I was wondering how much of my awareness of this sort of increased conversation around anything from supporting independent businesses to putting pressure on companies to act more ethically and sustainably, whether this is sort of my own echo chamber as well. That's one concern, but similarly, I think it is a real thing that there are more digital movements, as you say, but absolutely, people's circumstances now, for example, with the small business supporting independent businesses, that has been very much, in a way, the only thing we could do, especially online businesses, they're accessible. They've been able to sort of fill lots of gaps, and hopefully we will continue watching very carefully how those businesses continue to develop, as you say, their sustainability policies or how they move forward from this in a strong position, but with that still being a focus.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I mean, obviously, you've kind of touched on small business there, and it's something I wanted to kind of talk about specifically. Is for anyone who's ever worked for a corporate business, there's always various corporate social responsibility guidelines, and quite often they do a lot of things, charity events, and so on and so forth. And so I know there's something you'll know about this, Natalie. But I think one of the things for smaller businesses, micro businesses, there's this kind of like this unsure how you can help, what you can do for better and helping, whether it's your local community or just anything in particular. So what ideas, what thoughts have you guys got that, and I know obviously small businesses, individuals kind of run into the same thing to an extent because it is a small number of individuals. I'll come to you, Natalie, first on this, but kind of what can small businesses generally do to support and what they can do to, improve society?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one because we've been asked that quite a lot. I think, some of the smaller businesses who might contact us feel like they can't give us what a larger organisation could give us. But I think the big thing that I always talk about, and this applies to everything, is it is about just talking about stuff. So if you've got small businesses are generally really connected and really well connected to their communities, and there's something about that relationship that they have with that community that can build and build going forward. And it's that ripple effect, isn't it? Actually, the more you talk about whether it's an issue, whether it's homelessness, whether it's something else, whether it's sustainability or anything, the more you talk about that and champion those causes, the more, and people who trust you, and those sort of small businesses in local communities are quite, they're really well trusted as well. So there's something about, simple things like talking about these championing certain causes, following the social media and sharing that with your sort of networks. And small businesses don't always want to remain small. I think there's always, you've got to remember as well, small businesses will grow. So there's something about, if you're the first cause, charity, whatever that they've worked with, then actually that could be quite an amazing thing going forward as they grow and talk about you and talk about that particular cause. So I think it's not just about giving money or being a charity partner or corporate sponsor. There's lots of smaller things that small businesses can do, and even things like if they have a small, even if it's like a couple of people in that team who can maybe do a bit of volunteering, it doesn't have to be money, it could also be time as well. So I always say it's not just about money, it's time, it's awareness. There's lots and lots of things that small businesses can do, but I think it's that long-sightedness as well for charities and causes. Think actually these aren't always going to be small, and actually let's just sort of work with them to sort of champion those causes.
Yeah, that's an interesting point there, Natalie. I think that's really important. I think the point you make there about small businesses generally being a bit more trusted by people, I've not really thought about that. And I think it's a really key point, as where it can maybe have more of an impact to an extent, because there's a bit of the cynical side of things, that people think that the bigger businesses are doing it for whatever, essentially PR. And I guess whether they are or not is not that relevant. If they're raising lots of money for charity, there's kind of a positive side to that, but smaller businesses do have that little bit more of trust. And obviously, I was going to come to you next, Laura, on this, because I know you talk about sustainability a lot. So kind of how do you think kind of small businesses and sustainability, how they can kind of contribute?
I think the important thing to think about is, sustainability is still very much an unknown. It's interesting really when you look at the theory behind sustainability and the different models and different business plans and things that you can put in place, regardless of whether you're excuse me, a small business, a solo entrepreneur. Most of the kind of academic side of things is the same as it was in the 80s. A lot of the definitions of what sustainability actually is were formed like 30 years ago, and so really, if you're looking for guidance point of view, you actually might sit there and think either the stuff that's out there is way too big for my business, it just doesn't apply, or is this still relevant? And I think when it comes to sustainability and social impact, really think about what your values are. You don't, like Natalie said, it doesn't have to be fundraising, it could be anything. Like if you are passionate about a really relevant thing for my business is there's a massive skills gap in the digital sector with young people, and it's kind of like, right, well, if I know that's the case and that's going to factor into my business development over time, let me do some work in that area. So could I mentor a student, or could I do events for the local college and give my knowledge to those students? So you're not, like Natalie says, you're not giving money, you're giving your time. You could do pro bono work. So if there's a cause that is really close to your heart, instead of it being stereotypical volunteering, you could do some work in exchange for your time for them. When it comes to sustainability, there are 3 core areas, and that's economic, social, and environmental. So when you're thinking about what fits for your business, I'd just take it right back to that kind of those 3 things and think, right, is there something I'm really passionate about as a business or manager, or my employees are really passionate about, that falls within those categories? And if there is, let's work through those. Pick an area that you're really passionate about, because if you're passionate about it, you're going to do that, make that difference in a more meaningful way. So I think when it comes to sustainability, I would really just strip it back to those 3 areas and think, right, am I passionate about the environment? Is there something to do with the community that I want to improve on? Is it an economic difference that I can make, whether that's through fundraising, providing jobs, apprenticeships? There's so many different things there, but I would really just sit and think, right, what am I passionate about? What aligns with my values or the values of my team, and go from there.
Brilliant advice. I think, Laura, that's fantastic. And come to you on that next, Kate. Obviously, you know, you are a small business, and so for you, it's very relevant for you. So, yeah. I guess maybe, what do you do? What kind of things do you do that you feel like is giving back and kind of the social responsibility?
So this is definitely something that is really top of my mind at the moment, and I'm trying to kind of get a few key goals going forward this year and then beyond. And it is quite tricky as a micro business, a sole trader in my case, to kind of, in terms of sustainability and especially the environmental side, separate. I work from home, you know, how much of this is my own sort of sustainable living goals and how much is actually specific to my business. I had a conversation with a sustainability consultant last week that was quite interesting, and the takeaways from that were really, you know, small changes that we feel are achievable, realistic for us at the time, but constantly reassessing that. So like Natalie said, you know, I intend to grow my business, and what is out of reach for me now, we were talking in particular about bank accounts. You know, as Laura said, investments is something that's really important to consider in terms of ethics and sustainability and where that money is going. And a bank account, the top, you know, like gold standard one, might not be within my reach now, but it might be in a year's time. Anything from that to kind of the importance of measuring your impact and maybe not assuming that one particular thing is going to make a massive impact. There might be something else that you haven't considered that's really easy to do and it's about measuring that. So, I mean, it does get quite technical, but it's actually easier than I expected to. And there were more areas of my business that I can sort of look at now and use some easy tools to kind of just, in terms of CO2 emissions, see what little steps I could make to improve that. And yeah, I've also been sort of thinking within my field of awareness, in particular, kind of a few ethical brands that I really look up to that, like as Laura says, have chosen kind of a focus related to what is obviously their passion. There's an eyewear brand, Pala Eyewear, and they support global projects that are specific to the eye health field. They visit, they're there on the ground. They don't just say, oh, we send, you know, we're donating this amount of money to blah, blah, blah. It's all there in great detail on their website. They're using video, they're using lots of different tools to get that message out there, the awareness, as well as supporting financially. For me, so you did ask, one of my goals this year is to do pro bono work for Translators Without Borders. It's been a goal of mine for a long time. I used to do a lot of pro bono work, and then family came along needing to do, sorry about the noise, we're moving, needing to kind of focus on my paid client work. And now I would very much like to kind of incorporate that to my business model, donating that time to something to my other passion, which is languages, and the amazing work that organisation in particular does. So yeah, definitely important to identify what small, sustainable choices that are related to what you're really passionate about, and then constantly reassessing how you could maybe do more or change, adapt what you're doing to make the biggest impact.
Absolutely. I think this kind of brings it around to the point around essentially education around, you know, what you can do well. I think one of my belief in is maybe a little bit naive, that most people want to do things that are good the best they can most of the time. And I think one of the problems is that a lot of people just don't know where to start with it and don't know what they can do that can make a little bit. You mentioned it there, Kate, those kind of small little changes that we can all probably make in our life. I saw a study recently when it was to do with animals and meat and things like that something like 60% of males aged between a certain age want to improve their environment, but didn't know that eating meat has a negative impact on that. They just didn't know that. And whilst obviously, you know, I know you three will probably do a lot of research and look into things, a lot of people won't. So is there maybe something we can do just to kind of put that information front and center for people a little bit more as we move forward? So I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Natalie.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think it is that, you know, you've got to really put stuff out there for people to see and hook into. And as Kate and Laura pointed out, the most important thing is that passion stuff, finding that passion, because if you find something that drives you and your teams and within organisations, it's a real win. I mean, I was just talking to my team the other day. We were talking a lot about well-being and 5 ways to well-being, and one of those being actually giving is you know, research has shown that actually giving, whether it's your time or money or whatever, is a key to happiness. It does make people feel better, and it makes staff, communities, it does make you feel more engaged and connected. So yeah, absolutely. I think it's just absolutely key to find that hook for people, to sort of, because obviously everybody's different, and people will have certain things that will trigger them, whether it is, like you say, in terms of sustainability and the environment, whether it's different causes, but you have to put that information out there. And, you know, for us as a charity, I want to do a lot more work this year on, you know, what people would want to know, what people want to see from us as a charity. What information do we need to get out there more? Is it more about, do people want to know more about the actual work our workers are doing on the streets? Do they want to know exactly how we utilize the funds? Or, you know, what is it that what's going to be the hook for people, and what are people not getting now from us that actually would make a difference to them to be able to incorporate it into their, whether it's their business model or it's just their life generally. So there's something around how we get that information out.
Absolutely. Laurie, kind of what your thoughts on kind of how we can maybe educate people and help people without having to find all information all the time?
Yeah, I guess if you're not the way inclined that I am, I'm a bit of a nerd, so I like reading like research papers and things like that. If that's not your bag, there are so many resources and things for you to just kind of start with. I mean, Netflix, while you have to kind of just assess the bias of certain documentaries, Netflix has got a pool of different things. There's one called Rotten, which is all about the food industry and the ethics behind it. There's loads of documentaries that you can watch. I mean, David Attenborough, you know, he's a great source of information for environmental impact. So I think that's one place to start. Is if you're not a reader, then there's plenty of things that you can watch. Again, kind of touching on what Natalie said, I think first things first, think about what triggers you. You know, if you go for a walk and there's litter everywhere and that really annoys you, then you think about if there are different initiatives out there that you can, whether it's recycling or whether it's litter picks, you know, base your research on what triggers you. Because like I said before, it's going to be what you're more passionate about. But from a resource point of view, there's loads on Netflix. From a business, the place I would start would probably be something like the UN Sustainable Development Goals. While they're a little bit techie and they do have a lot of jargon there, it gives you, I think it's like 18 categories, 18 different like subsets of things that you can focus on as a business to promote sustainable development. To then bring that home and make it relevant to your business or your kind of personality, I think it's then just thinking, do a bit of brainstorming, think about what that means for you, what that means in your community. And from there, Google is your best friend. The final kind of thing I'd suggest, I guess, is there's a wave of influencers. So for example, there's an influencer on Instagram called Less Waste Laura. As the name suggests, her brand is all about waste and reducing that. So there are also, if social media is more your bag, there are loads of people that you can just do some searching, look at some hashtags and find things that are relevant to you. I've got a list of influencers if people want them. I can always share that. But I think that's probably where I'd start, is look at documentaries that are available, look at things that you can watch, whether it's online or on TV. Look from a business perspective at something like the Sustainable Development Goals, or there's also I think it's called Blue Planet, but I'd have to double check. There's quite a few different websites and things that have got loads of information, and then like social media influencers. Go on, Kate.
Sorry. Just to add along the that line of tools, especially kind of user friendly, break it down, make it accessible tools. I don't know how your feeling towards this is. I know you would have to approach this also just by looking at like the method involved as well, but there are quite a few tools around now for breaking down what your carbon footprint is, looking at different areas, and you could approach that from a business perspective. One in particular, Geeky, which I've been talking about on social media, and I use from a personal perspective, but they also have like a business side of that, and that breaks it all down for you, so that you can see what the changes you make, what kind of impact that will have on your carbon footprint, and it relates it to the overall sort of global target of lowering emissions as well. I find that really easy to use. It's got lots of accessible information for each bit, so you can kind of delve into it really thoroughly if you want to, and then it also provides lots of further links. It's just a really good gateway into looking at where you can make those changes. If you find it all a bit overwhelming, you can focus on certain areas.
And another one, just on that note, I've recently done it, and they're actually fairly local. They're in the north of England. There's a green small business accreditation that you can do as well. It's run by a guy called Tim Maiden, and that's a really easy process. They take you through like an evaluation of how green, I guess, your business is, and give you ongoing, which is what you said before, Kate, ongoing tips and things to look at as well. So there's plenty around.
It's that process, and not trying to make all of the changes all at once, because it's just not achievable. And I would also suggest, if this is where people are wanting to focus and look ahead and plan, there are more and more local groups and business oriented groups around the idea of circular economy. Locally, there's Circular Yorkshire, where I'm about to move to. There's Rydal Environmental Group, and the town that we're moving to is trying to become a carbon neutral town, looking around how it can focus on the circular economy. So there are lots of sources there of inspiration, of research, support. So definitely worth kind of plugging into that as well.
I think it's really interesting how we've kind of gone to the subject around environmental issues there, because I believe that once all the current situations, shall we say, is kind of gone, hopefully, is that the next big thing that we're going to be talking about for a number of years is around the environment. I think it's obviously been around for a number of years. We're talking about it, but I do firmly believe that's going to be the next thing. And I'll say various things we've heard of the government, things like electric cars and things like that, bringing all that forward. It seems like there's some relatively ambitious things that we're going to be doing in the UK. So I was going to kind of ask about if there's any advice, and you kind of touched on it a bit. Any thoughts on how businesses and individuals, I guess, can do better for the environment? Laura,
I think you're right. I think, and I mean, the government are trying, I guess. There are initiatives coming in which are forcing people's hand, and I think that's what's necessary. I think in order for this to work, it needs to be combined with social impact, to be completely honest with you. But the other thing, again, to be that annoying person is, for example, they've just given the green light for a coal mine in Cumbria. And it's very much like they've done that to promote jobs and give jobs to an area where there's a lot of the employment rate is quite low. However, this is where, again, I think some social movement needs to be done, because renewable energy is a huge source of jobs and income, and it's obviously good for the environment. So it's very much like, I think I think more needs to be done. And I think going back to what we started with, I guess, we need to hold people accountable to this, especially because we are, as a country, hosting the next climate summit, and we've just announced that. It's just backwards to me. But I think from a tips point of view, it's holding people accountable. So if there's something that you like, a coal mine that's being announced, or there's land being taken over near you and you think it could be used better, or little things like promoting recycling, talk about it. That's the best thing you can do. Talk about it as a business. Like I mentioned before, and like Kate's mentioned, there's loads of resources. There's the accreditations you can do. But I think the basics of environmental impact are what you learn at school. It's reduce, reuse, and recycle. And if you constantly think about those three things in your day-to-day life, reduce your consumption, reuse things where possible, and recycle things where not possible to reuse them, that is, you've done it. Like that's all you can do when it comes to environmental impact. So I guess that would be my advice, really.
Completely agree. I think going forward, we really need to tackle this idea that action for the environment somehow goes against what's best for the economy and for people's real lives. I don't see how we can make the change we need to make without doing that. And it's a challenge. Hopefully the government will wake up and realise this at some point. But in the meantime, I think small businesses especially can lead by example, and be trendsetters. And like you say, they have this power in that people trust them. So within the local community and further afield, they can really set the example that larger business and governments need to follow. And definitely job creation is perfectly possible and necessary within the green.
The kind of the reason I asked that question, I'll come to you in a minute, second, Natalie, is that quite often something has to happen, a big thing for things to change, doesn't it? That's kind of the way of the world. And obviously with what we've experienced in the last year, I personally believe, like I said, the outcome, one of the outcomes that will be big change in the world is around the environment, because obviously there's less travelling, there's us doing things like this rather than being in the same room, like that, which have kind of started that process. So I do think it's kind of that bottom-up approach, isn't it? That individuals will take that responsibility, and as we go forward. But yeah, I'll come to you, Natalie. Anyway, I jumped in there.
Yeah, no, it's fine, and I think you're right. I think as well, when you've got that, and certainly for us to say, if you've got quite a good following on a social media platform, that's a real opportunity to jump on that as well, because you've got that captive audience. So it is a time for lots of businesses to do that self-reflection, isn't it? Around, okay, we've just had the pandemic, we've had to work in a completely different way, but there's some really good bits that have come from that in terms of actually we have done a lot more in terms of impact on the environment. For me now, I'm thinking, do we need certain things that we've had before? We've utilised office spaces. Do we have to do that? Can we have this hybrid of working from home, working from a place? Do we need to work in the way we've worked before, when actually we've done some really good, because it's been kind of pushed upon us in terms of the COVID stuff, we've ended up working in a completely different way that has been miles better for the environment. So that comes with a bit of responsibility as well, when you've got a platform and you can use that and talk really positively about that stuff that you're doing, because that's a real opportunity for other people to see, and then it kind of grows, doesn't it? It's like what you said, Kate, about being those trendsetters and being those, we're the ones who can kind of move stuff forward. So yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of change, and really, really positive, and not, it won't be for everyone, and some people will still have to go back to how it was before, but I think there's definitely some really positive stuff we can take in the way that we've worked over the last, how long has it been now? 10 years? 8, 9 months, whatever it's been.
Yes, thank you, Natalie. No, that's great, guys, and I think you give me quite a lot of ideas anyway, if nothing else, and I really, really appreciate that. So obviously I'm assuming that everyone's happy if someone wants to get in contact with you and ask you about anything in these subjects, whether it's obviously directly what you do for, obviously, especially yourself, Natalie, but also you and Kate and Laura, and are all around sustainability and environmental issues. I know it's very important subject matters to you guys, and I think the point about local businesses it's made me think about it actually in terms of what I can do or we can do as a business, and some ideas I've been writing down as you guys have been talking. So that's a positive thing.
Sort of proves that this point of sharing and inspiring each other.
Perfect.
It's very easy to do, and it's completely free.
Exactly, and I think that's kind of one of the points I wanted to get from this for people. There is things that you can do that isn't just spending money, because that, you know, we all know it's difficult for a lot of people, individuals and businesses at the moment. So if you can't do that, you know, then do something else, whatever that may be. So yeah, I really want to thank you guys. I think it's been a really interesting conversation, and it's kind of, like I said, it's made me think about a lot of things. And I know personally, I'll probably be picking all your brains about things that we can do in the future. So thank you very much for your time, guys.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Thanks. Take care.